So, where do I start with Tammy? What was your first perception or impression when you interacted with um, people at University of Evansville who didn't look like you?
So lucky for me, I had the privilege to travel around the world from young age, and not only travel, but actually live in countries that are completely different to where I grew up. So just to give you a rough idea, up until I was 8 years old, I was living in Serbia, which is a small, not really developed country in Eastern Europe. And then when I was 8 years old, I experienced a major life transition and a major cultural shock. I moved to one of the poorest countries in Africa. It's a small country called Lesotho. So you can imagine that, my cultural shocks have begun at that age. So when you're only 8 years old, you don't speak a foreign language, you've never traveled to any countries, and then you suddenly find yourself in, the Southern Africa with people who speak a language that's different from you, who look completely different from you, where, just everything about life as I knew it until then was completely new. It was literally like throwing me on another planet. So I kind of want to reverse it back and start from there and then build my way up to University of Evansville. So that's when I had my first cultural shock. But very quickly, obviously, I enrolled into my school that I went to, which was an international school. And, my class was a very diverse mixture. So I ended up having a very international group of friends at a very young age. And then from there and onwards, as I was growing up, I would be spending some time in my home country of Serbia and sometimes living in other countries. So by the point when I was in, third year of university, when I was at the University of Evansville, being surrounded with new faces, people who look different to me, people who have different accents to me, or anything that's different from my culture and my background, it wasn't something new. It was something that I've already been through way back when I was 8 years old. So I think that my first kind of cultural shock went back at that age, at 8 years old. And then, as I said, you quickly enroll in school, you start speaking to those people, and little by little, you start making connections. You start talking about what do you have in your lunchbox that day. You start talking about, the homework you're doing. Then you realize, we do have topics in common. We, go on about our life after school the same way. We enjoy the same activities. On the weekends, we did the same things with our families. So I think that it was already back then when I was 8 years old that I realized that, these guys, yeah, they look different to me. But, there's just so much that I actually have in common with them. And, so we can have so many conversations, we can build a relationship, and that doesn't actually mean anything really.
Having lived in so many countries since you were so little, how do you think your cultural identity was built?
Oh, that's a really good one. So I know that from people that I met as I was moving around, someone who's been moving from basically their birth may have those struggles with finding their identities. But for me, even though I moved around a lot, both of my parents do have origins in the same country, and the rest of my family also is from the same country. And as I said, even though I was moving around, I would always kind of be returning to my base, which is Serbia, and my first language will always be Serbian. So I do have, I think, a strong sense of my cultural heritage, and no matter where I end up living, I'm currently in Australia, and even if I spend, I think, the next 30 years of my life in Australia, I think that I will still feel like I'm Serbian, because that's where I was born, and even though I moved around a lot, that's still where I spent most of my years growing up. So yeah, that's kind of how I'd describe it. But I do think that even though that's my background, in my mind, my mindset is global. It's international, and that was built and shaped by the experiences that I've had moving around.
What would you say is the core enjoyment that you have find in each of the cultures?
Yeah, well, good question. And just to paint the picture for your audience, I really have lived in 5 continents. So anywhere from Asia, Africa, Europe, US, and Australia. I've only have South America left on my list. Hopefully we get there as well. So what I'm trying to say with that is that, yes, indeed, my experiences really went very, very broad in terms of different cultures. And I think at the end of the day, if we kind of draw that bottom line, and the reason why I think that today, well, not I think, I know that I can connect with anyone regardless of their culture, and I know this as someone who works in the field of psychology as well, is that yes, maybe we do have different habits, maybe we do pray to different gods, maybe we don't look the same, but if we cut it to the core, we all have the same basic needs. We all, as human beings, seek pleasure and avoid pain. That's pretty much universal. We all long for safety, and we all long to be loved and to have someone to love. So that's who we are at the core, no matter where you grew up, no matter where you lived. And as I mentioned, any of these differences, you can find connection, because it is the basic, the core needs that we have as human beings are the same, really, no matter where you are, in the village, in the city, no matter how you're going about your day. That's kind of, at the end of the day, I think that we're all intrinsically pursuing.
What is that moves you to serve the population in terms of mental health?
So I was always kind of gravitating towards social sciences. Was not good at anything with numbers or anything of that sort. And I realized, why not? It's applicable to different fields, and I do think that I have that kind of natural capacity to connect with people, to speak to them, even more importantly, to listen well. So I thought that that would be a good decision. And now, years later, I think I still think I've made the right decision. And you know what? I think that especially in the world of today, when life pace is picking up, we're more and more kind of reliant on technology. And I know that everyone emphasizes, technical growth and things like that. I think that we still, as much as we have advanced as a humanity in technological sense, I think that we still need to have people like myself who kind of praise and kind of embrace and encourage people to nurture their mental health, to nurture their emotional well-being and things like that, because we cannot escape from who we are. Yes, we have fancy technology and we're living a bit more modern life, but we need to still take care of who we really are as human beings, and that's where psychology comes into game. And I still think that it's super important, it's critical, and I think that it comes before anything else. So that's kind of why I want to work in this field, because for me it is very important.
How do you interact with someone that has a rotten part inside or a broken piece inside? How do you see that?
Love the question, first of all. So following my psych degree, I actually finished a coaching course that specializes in eating psychology, right? And this approach is, to a great extent, formulated on more sort of a positive psychology approach. And what I mean by that is that when we say positive, it means really trying to extract the good in the bad, kind of going back to your question. And that's why, for example, in my field of work, and my audience would know this, I try to avoid as much as I can the word disorder, whatever. And in mental health, you'll probably hear a lot of mental disorder, this disorder, whatever. For me personally, I do not believe in, I know that I'm probably going to get some critique from my fellow psychiatrists, and I don't have anything against it, but for me personally, my view and my approach, I don't think that the people that I work with, I don't think that they're disordered human beings. Instead, I think that they are just humans who have this challenge, whether it's a psychological or physical, depending how the problem is manifesting itself. They have this challenge that has come to their life to teach them something wiser. So whether it's for them to do work on themselves, whether it's for them to grow, whether they need to pay attention to a certain area of their life. So I see them as human beings who have gotten this challenge for the purpose of them to grow into a better version of themselves.
And can you speak about that in like a personal experience?
So yeah, for my personal story, it was about 2 years back. I was going through a major transition. And I guess I just didn't know how to fulfill the void that had suddenly happened in my life. And what happened, my coping mechanism with that is that I kept on just robotically and automatically going to the fridge and pretty much binge eating anything that I could find in a few minutes of time, just completely losing control over my eating decisions. And that was just a very scary experience, first of all, because I've never had anything like that. I always felt like I was the one who had the power over what I'm doing or how I'm eating and things like that. So suddenly to experience something where it feels like somebody else is taking my body to the fridge and eating this food, I sort of first of all, it was emotionally challenging to go through that. Why is this happening to me? What am I doing? Am I crazy? Do I not have enough of strength to stop myself and things like that? So you start thinking that maybe there's something disordered with you. But if you look into it deeper, you'll have to find that there is something that is triggering that. So that's when I started making that shift into, instead of thinking, hey, I'm faulty and I'm wrong and I'm disordered and I'm doing something that is not right, I started asking myself the question of, why is this happening and what is this trying to teach me? That's when we are actually starting to work on ourselves. We're starting to dig deeper and we're starting to get to know ourselves better. We're kind of going into our own unconscious because, I sat back and I thought, it mustn't be physical hunger, right? When I was going frantically to the fridge, it's not like my stomach just grew overnight and I suddenly had this appetite. So I realized it's not coming from the stomach, it's not coming from the belly, it's coming from the heart or it's coming from the head. And for me, it was because of that transition and the difficult emotions that came along that transition that kind of was a trigger for me. But you know what, for everyone it can be different. It can be anything in life, really, from changing schools, from trauma that we just buried and don't want to address it, that's suddenly coming up. It can be any field of life, really. With my clients, we open up very different conversations, and we just kind of dig and explore where could these challenges be coming from.
I can say that when I was bulimic and my body was willing, like that was the sense that I wanted, right? To vomit whatever I ate it. But
Yeah.
my inner self was conscious and aware that I didn't need to do that. And all of the positive comments that I have received were at the same time so small with the negative comments that we're like eating the positive comments, right? How do you process feeling so human in that we are all in this together, suffering somehow,
Yeah.
trying to listen to our inner self, but um, at the same time, we want to show a perfect face of humanity.
Mm-hmm. Oh, what beautiful words you just said, and I appreciate your honesty so much. See, the reason why it's good that you brought that up is in a lot of ways that is the mission of the work that I've started to do. Why do I mean a mission? My mission is to, I wouldn't really say normalize challenges in the eating realm, because obviously we don't want those challenges to become a normal part of our life. We want to overcome them and live free without them, right? So I wouldn't say that I want to normalize them, but I want to normalize speaking about it. Because here's what happens. If I normalize it, if I normalize speaking about it like a conversation that we're having right now, like chit chat or captions that I'm sharing with my audience, or the conversations that I'm having with my clients, that's where the beauty of removing the word disordered comes from. Because we free ourselves from the labels and we actually focus on just improving our lives as human beings and working towards being the better versions of ourselves, and kind of removing that whole medical slash label aspect of it. And that's actually where healing happens. Because healing, if we cut it to the core, it's conversations. Because it's through conversations that we make connections. It's through conversations that we get deeper. It's through conversations that we make conclusions, we make plans how to go on about it. So we need to kind of free those conversations and kind of push ourselves away from the labels. I think that that's kind of the core. Because when people see like, oh, I can talk with this coach about it, and we can talk about it as it's any life challenge, then I'm not disordered. I'm just having a trouble dealing with something, and that's really what it was. And if I think back about myself, um, do I think I am a disordered human being because for a phase in my life I was binge eating? No, I just think that I was going through a phase that was difficult for me to process, and I chose a wrong way of dealing with it.
I'm really thankful for how you're approaching this, because just listening to you, I think, okay, this is not a conversation between an ex binge eater and an ex bulimic. It's a conversation between two people that have struggled with eating disorders, and that still are struggling with different things, and that we can talk about it. Like, it makes me so human from where I was experiencing it and until now. Like, it's not that I'm more human now than I was before.
Exactly. And it kind of goes back to what you asked earlier, like how do we go from looking at it this bad thing and me being disorder, me being wrong, me being worse than everyone around me, towards, hey, here are, I don't know, Mariela and Tamara, and they've had these experiences, but guess what? I am sure that you've learned a hell of a lot from your experience. I know for a fact that my experience actually directed me into the specific field of work that I actually always actually gravitated towards, but I didn't even know until it hit me. And now I turn it towards working for a greater cause. I started my business that revolves around helping people. It's a new approach, it's a new way. So here we are, we went through a challenge and we used it to become better versions of ourselves. We got to know ourselves a lot better. We explored the depths of ourselves that we probably would have never gotten to know if it wasn't for these experiences.
Tammy, what would you say is the shell that you keep using to protect yourself from those outsider tags or labels?
Shell. I first of all love this metaphor, and I think that to a certain extent, we all sometimes more or less put on a mask or a shell, as if you may call it. And I think that again, it takes self-work. And I think that once we become more comfortable with ourselves, with our goods and bad sides, I think that that's when we come to a point that we're ready to slowly start releasing our shells. So for example, if we shift back to 2 years ago, when my challenges with eating started, I was back then in a shell, as you said. You didn't have the courage to go out there and be like, this is me, this is what I've experienced, this is what I've taken from it, here I am right now. I wouldn't have the courage to break out of my shell back to 2 years ago while I was still in my challenge and before I was going through my course, before I learned a great deal, before I've done that work and eventually learned a lot about myself as well. So yeah, my shell at the time maybe would have looked like, going on about my day, smiling, not, mentioning this to anyone. So I think that shell can be, it can be both actually psychological and physical. So physical would be in a form of making ourselves look different to who we truly are. I think that, or dressing different or behaving different, that would be the physical ones. And the psychological ones, I think, would be kind of, as we mentioned before, acting different to how you feel, because showing emotions might be tough, might be difficult. Not feeling free to express your views or what you're really thinking. So, for example, right now in the world, we can see so much is happening. I think that now people may be starting to feel a little bit more expressive, vocal, and free to share what they're thinking. But we know that unfortunately that's still a work in progress. There's still probably a lot of people not being able to freely express what they think. So that's a form of a shell as well. So I think that in a lot of ways, shell can be a very broad concept, and in different settings, it can take different forms, if that's how I'd have to sum it up.
If you were to have an opportunity with Tammy of 8 years old, who might be at this point mad and upset because her parents are once again moving out of another country to another country, what would you
Uh-huh.
say to her?
Oh, this one makes me think a little. Wait. I would say keep doing what you're doing. Um, Soften up and open up to everything that these experiences and that these random people from anywhere over the world have come to teach you, because I think that that's where I formed my identity and myself. It's through those experiences of moving around and stumbling across so many extremely different experiences and extremely different people. So the more that I can absorb from them, the better. So that's why I would say open up, open your eyes, open your ears, um, keep making friends as you go, because that's going to enrich your life. Don't you worry.
Uh,